This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper, White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Beneroff, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, John Bailey, the Citizen-Net reporter here. It was a White Plains Week that I'll never forget, and it was highlighted by these headlines as we go to the White Plains Week video newsreel, and there we were stacked up day after day. Headlines that startled you. You had to read it when it came in, and each day the news got worse. And then today, and we're taping on Friday morning, this one, and this again points out the situation we are all facing in an individual way. We're all being assaulted by this, by worry, by concern. And Governor Cuomo addressed how this is affecting us in his messages on Thursday. Here's the governor.
We talk about this as a government response. The federal government's doing this, state government is doing this, government. This manifests on a number of levels, and the government response is obviously very important. But the impact, I think, is greater and probably greatest as a social phenomenon and on people and on families. This is tremendously disruptive on all sorts of levels. It came out of the blue. For me, in New York, it reminds me of 9/11, where one moment, which was inconceivable, just changed everything, changed your perspective on the world, changed your perspective on safety. Children who were young at that time, but of school age, watched on TV. They didn't know if their parents were coming home. I think it changed their whole outlook on life after 9/11. This is a situation like that. It's obviously totally different magnitude, but it's like that. It's a moment that just changes your whole life. Yesterday you were going to work and you were going to go to the office party. Today you're at home and the kids are at home, and you're worried about health, and you're worried about your job, and you're worried about economics, and you're dealing with personal issues, and you're dealing with family issues, and it's all happening at once. And then you turn on the TV, and there's all this different information, and nobody can tell you if this is going to be 30 days or 60 days or 4 months or 5 months or 9 months. The stress, the emotion is just incredible, and rightfully so. It is a situation that is one of the most disruptive that I have seen, and it will change almost everything going forward. It will. That is a fact. It's not your perception. It's not just you. It's all of us. And it's true, and it's real. Nobody can tell you when this is going to end. Nobody can tell you. I talked to all the experts. Nobody can say 2 months, 4 months, 9 months. Nobody. it's hard living your life with that big a question mark out there. Nobody can tell you when you go back to work. People can tell you that it's not just you economically, it's everyone. Take comfort in that. Federal government is actually acting on an economic package. But it's true. Having your family all together is a beautiful thing. It's also different for a lot of people, especially for a prolonged period of time. So these are major shifts in life and in the most emotional, stressful conditions that you can imagine. And I think my own personal advice is understand it for what it is. And that it's not just you, it has changed everything. And it will for the foreseeable future. And think through how you're going to deal with it and what it means. And even try to find a positive in it, right? It's a very negative circumstance. But you're going to have time on your hands. You're going to have time with your family. You're going to have time at home. In this busy, hurry-up world, all of a sudden somebody said, okay, you have a couple of months where you're going to be home with the family, no work, you work from home, but it's a totally different situation. How do you use that? How do you adjust? It's not going to be done overnight, but it is something that everybody has to think through.
The governor, wise words, take them to heart. And one of the things that hit home to me was the mayor held a special meeting of the Common Council Monday for the council to approve the document that the county asked the city and every other city and town in Westchester to sign, and that was to have the cities liable if any of their officials or employees disclosed health information on coronavirus victims, or for that matter, any situations. But in other words, the county enacted a control of information, which may or may not be to the advantage, but we have to see how that works out. The mayor, when the council voted to approve that document, then gave the report on Monday afternoon. Last Monday, Monday afternoon, he said that there were 200 cases in Westchester of coronavirus exposed persons. And it is now 800 as of yesterday afternoon. So you can see that this progressed through the week. And the number of cases announced each day nationally from February 28th. So here it is, the 19th. So in 3 weeks, it is exponential. That appears on the front page of the Times today. Now, the county executive held a news conference Monday afternoon after the governor's momentous commentaries and numbers and projections over the weekend. And let's go to Westchester County Commissioner of Health, Shirlita Ambler, followed by George Latimer on Monday, who detailed how the county is working with the state to upgrade hospital capacity.
So anytime we are combating an infectious disease, we like to have a vaccine where we can prevent the disease, or we hope that we will have drugs that we can treat the disease with. But unfortunately, in combating COVID-19, we have neither of those. We do not have a vaccine. We do not have specific drugs yet that can be used to treat this disease. So that leaves us with one tool really in our chest, and that is that we can reduce the exposure to people, because without exposure, there is no risk. Without risk, there is no disease. So that is why closing schools, closing restaurants, preventing people from congregating together That is the goal of that, is to reduce exposure, prevent exposure, and thereby reduce people from getting sick. So as the county executive was saying, with most infectious diseases, as they occur, you have a spike in the number of cases because all of those people who've been exposed, who are susceptible to the disease, develop the disease. And if we get huge numbers of people, that is our concern, who are ill, our hospital systems may just not be able to deal with that large a number of people. So it is our hope that by reducing exposure, we can flatten that curve, keep that peak from occurring, keep the numbers lower, and by doing that, we'll buy time for us to develop a vaccine, to get drugs that we can treat it with, and hopefully we will prevent people from dying. So I appreciate the governor's and the county executive's efforts to reduce the exposure for our entire population, especially those most vulnerable, our seniors, and people with immunocompromising diseases who are at greatest risk of death from this virus.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. The county has embarked on a number of different activities that are critical in this direction as we look to the future. We are identifying right now, through Joan McDonald, who's with us, our Director of Operations, a number of different sites, whether they're county-owned or privately owned, that may serve some purpose as we fight this contagion. We are looking at vacated spaces like Arrowwood, former conference center that closed a few months ago. We're looking at sites that have long been closed, like United Hospital. We're looking at office buildings in a variety of different places, College of New Rochelle, which has been transacted in a sale. In each one of these cases, we're talking to the ownership, and we're trying to determine what possible use those facilities might be. They might be used for medical backup purposes. They might be used to house individuals who have to go through isolation because they've tested positive for COVID-19, but they live in a setting, in a multifamily building with a number of other people for which the traditional quarantining won't work quite the same way and effectively. We're looking at a host of those different things, and we're trying to be helpful in this and look forward. We're prepared to allocate county resources toward that end. Glen Island parking lot has become the site of our first mobile testing facility where we've jumped up the testing dramatically. The state is in charge of that. And over the course of Friday to today, we've had many more people tested than could be handled in the one-on-one testing that happened previously. And we certainly have other places that are available, Playland, FDR Park in the northern part of the county, should the state determine to open a second or a third site in Westchester. They obviously have a statewide issue to deal with, and so their actions will take in Long Island and upstate and New York City as well as Westchester County.
Okay, that was Monday afternoon, and on Thursday, Chris Burke, the town supervisor of Bedford, put out an email, and he said that decision that George Latimer in his visit to the town board meeting told Mr. Burke and the town board that the decisions as to where these new facilities would be streamlined or installed in existing buildings would be decided by New York State. Mr. Burke also said that the county executive indicated that the county budget was, quote, blown, unquote, as is the state budget, and we will have more on that a little bit later in the program. Mr. Burke also, in a great service, published the list of daycare centers that the county has miraculously thrown together in 3 days, and you can read all of them on the WPCNR.com website. For the list of daycare centers in White Plains, it is at Ridge that Post Road School, and also food is being served in White Plains, and that's on my website to students who deserve it. And the superintendent of schools has said that has not indicated where we are yet, but that the White Plains schools are going to be teaching online, so the superintendent will be coming on with more on that shortly. Now, let's take a look. at what was really the big deals of the week. Yesterday, Governor Cuomo announced mortgage relief for the financial hardship of persons afflicted with the coronavirus, a 90-day mortgage relief, and you can see more on that probably this afternoon. He also waives fees for overdrafts, ATMs, and credit cards. And then he, on Thursday afternoon, these are the figures of Thursday afternoon, they will change today. And so this is just as it went into today. The counties with existing cases in blue, the counties with new cases yesterday in yellow. And then we gained the distinction of being this country's most impacted state. We now have 2,382 cases at the top, with California coming on up. Their governor is very concerned, and that was in yesterday's paper. Everybody should be at the forefront. Now, the total New York tested so far is 22,000, and the total new cases 7,584. And now this is good because we're ramping up the testing, and that is part of the reason why the numbers are going up. Now, next slide, hospitalizations. 777 out of 4,152 in the state. 19% of the cases have been found to have it. So that's actually not great, but it's not bad either. If we can keep it at 19% or below, it will be very good for everyone. Now, next slide. Here's the Johns Hopkins slide. The governor will show you this every day. The total world cases worldwide, 222,000. Deaths worldwide, 9,115. That's 4% of the persons that have it. The total recoveries, 84,000. That's 38%. I added the percentages, folks. That wasn't on the governor's slide. And the pending cases of 129,000 in their disposal. If you figure that over the next 7 or 8 weeks or so, the death rate, you'll come up with 49,000 deaths worldwide, but you will have approximately 80,000 recoveries, which I think is the plus side of this. There's nothing plus about this slide, but the plus side is we have just to keep it down. Now, the single most important phone call ever made in this century, of course, is the call that Governor Cuomo made to President Trump on Monday evening. This was a big-time call. Governor Cuomo called up President Trump, and he asked for help, stressed it. I don't know what he said, but he said the right thing, and President Trump, to his everlasting credit, agreed. He agreed to send a hospital ship up from Puerto Rico, which should arrive the first week in April with 1,000 beds, surgeons, operating rooms, whatever, and that will be a big help as the cases ramp up, particularly in New York metropolitan area. And Mr. Trump also agreed to send military medical units. We don't know exactly what they deliver, but he's sending them to be located around the area and the state. This will help get the bed capacity going. So congratulations to Mr. Trump and Mr. Cuomo for pulling together. And Mr. Trump should be thanked for that. Thank you, President Trump. Now, coming up, we have a little budget matter which was touched on briefly by the budget director for New York State, and he pointed out that revenues are really down as a result of this. And here is how Governor Cuomo said this is going to be addressed.
You pick a point where you believe the rest of the revenues will be. How do you pick that point? Well, we picked the point a few months ago. The Assembly picked the point, the Senate picked the point. The Comptroller now says that point is too high, but you pick a point. That's a big decision. You do a budget based on that point. And then you say, caveat, if the revenues are below that, we have to have a built-in mechanism to adjust the expenditures, right? Do you know what I'm saying? So you pick a point, and then you have a built-in adjustment mechanism that if the revenues continue to slow, which I believe they will, that you have a self-adjustment mechanism in the budget. So you don't have to come back every 24 hours to readjust the budget when the revenues shift.
And this is very important to keep in mind because the state budget is in flux right now. We had a $6 billion deficit. Well, it's larger than that now. And what I also feel is I try and stay with what the governor tells us. He says facts are important, and he has the facts. What we are now seeing over the last few days is people throwing figures around leaders who should not do that because it confuses people. It creates panic, and we do not want that. We have to really take things in stride and do what we can. Now, what can we do? We're in on an interview with the gentleman who cleans the New Rochelle railroad station and parking lots, and what he does to do that is he wears gloves. Now, I recommend everybody wear gloves because that way when any surface you touch, a stair railing, a doorknob, well, you don't have to pick up anything from that doorknob. And of course, as I am told whenever I come home in the evening by my wife, wash your hands. This is very important. Wash them as much as possible and wash them with soap. Soap is a big thing. It actually kills the coronavirus, the only thing that does. So I would take many more baths, showers, whatever, and use that soap. It's the best thing you can have if you have been exposed to the virus. Now, closing out, I want to take a very personal moment that Governor Cuomo shared in his news conference yesterday. He had his daughter, Michaela Kennedy Cuomo, who is about, I'd say, 21 years old, and Mr. Cuomo addressed the youth.
To the younger people in our great state and in our great society, and that's why I invited our special guest here today, Michaela. My grandfather, Andrea, my grandfather on my father's side, his name was Andrea. I'm named for my grandfather, Andrew, Italian-American immigrant. When I was young-ish, I was like 16, 17, 18, and I would do something that he didn't like, he would just look at me and he would say, "We grow too soon old and too late smart." And I would say, "What does that mean, Grandpa? Is that a criticism? We grow too soon old, too late smart." These pictures of young people on beaches, these videos of young people saying, "This is my spring break, you know, I'm out to party, this is my time to party." This is so unintelligent and reckless, I can't even begin to express it. Now, I had a conversation with my daughter about this. I'm governor of the state. I can order a quarantine of 10,000 people, but I can't tell my daughter to do anything, all right? And I have to be careful because there's almost an inverse response to a direct action. But I did say to all three of them, from soon as they could crawl, I used one line. What is the one line I used to say?
Risk reward.
Yeah. Risk reward. Risk reward. Just pose the question. I couldn't offer an answer because whatever answer I would offer, they would do the other. Risk reward. It makes no sense to go expose yourself to these conditions and expose other people. Expose other people. Michaela wanted to take, first of all, Michaela was graduating this year, and her school closed to online courses, so she's not going to have the graduation. We're going to have a big party at the appropriate time. We don't know what that time is going to be, if it's going to be 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, but at the first opportunity, we're going to have a big party, so that's going to happen. But she was deprived of the last year and the last few months of college, which I'm sure were a very intense study period, and that's what she is deprived of, that intense study period of those last few weeks. I remember those last few weeks, a lot of study. But that's a shift in life. But she was going to take a vacation on spring break and go with friends and take a trip and risk reward. And luckily, she made the right decision, and I'm proud of her for that. No prompting from me besides the questions. Risk reward. What these people are doing is the risk does not justify the reward. They're putting themselves at risk. Young people can get coronavirus. That's one of the other myths. Young people don't get it. Young people do get it. And young people can transfer it. And you can wind up infecting someone and possibly killing someone if you're exposed to it.
Risk reward. Please consider that. And to the young people who saw that, you saw something really unusual. You saw Governor Cuomo with his daughter and telling how she arrived at that decision on her own, not to go. And I think it's something that all young people should really consider. You have to wash hands, not go in groups, not hang out when you're elsewhere, or just these crowds are where the coronavirus is. You don't know who you're running into. So please heed the plea to wash hands, avoid, keep the distance, because you are the future. We need you. You are going to build this nation. We're trying our best right now to save the nation. I can't do much. I do this show. And this is John Bailey saying good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.